Thank you. Thank you. And thank you everyone for being present today for this training, which, as you know, is focusing on the establishment of eco-mooring areas for recreational vessels under 24 meters. I just remind you the context. This is done in the framework of a project called the Mediterranean Blue Forests, managed by WWF. And we have uh, created this toolkit in order to inform all eco-mooring area managers of the possibility to use them. The Mediterranean Blue Forest program aims at proposing solutions to protect the Posidonia meadows by 2030. Because, as you know, Posidonia meadows are a very sensitive habitat, which is degraded by recreational boating. And today we need to find solutions to manage mooring and anchoring of recreational boating. So I'll introduce myself. My name is Amélie Foncuberta. I am a engineer, a marine engineer, and I'm a consultant for WWF. And I am supporting municipalities and towns in the establishment of eco-mooring areas in France. So I support them on the carrying out of studies, works, applications, and the relations, the link, make the link between service providers and public authorities. I'm working with Catherine Piant. I've been working with her for quite a few years. She's responsible for the Posidonia program in France, and she's going to be with us for the next training. So you have this slide just to know who the participants are. There's about 22 countries registered in this training, which shows that many countries are interested in protecting Posidonia meadows. Don't hesitate to raise your hands or to write in the chat if you have any questions. We will tell you whatever we can on what is happening in France. And you can also tell us what is happening in your countries. So don't hesitate to interact with us. So, Slido. The question is, did you take part in the first training module? Because I want to know that so that I can understand whether I have to talk about Posidonia meadows a bit or not. Please answer this question. Did you take part in the first training module? Just 8 people have participated in the survey and have answered the question. Please answer the question, please. So in the next slides, I will talk about Posidonia and the distribution of this sensitive habitat, recreational boating, and the degradation caused by anchors of recreational vessels. So maybe since many people have already participated in the first modules, we can skip that. Here you have some links to websites where you can find literature on studies and service providers used in certain countries, and all the sensitive habitats and relevant knowledge. So you can find all the information if you click on these links. So why this training? Because as we said, Recreational boating is very important from an economic point of view in the Mediterranean, and therefore we cannot stop recreational boating. However, we need to better manage it. This is why this training. We want to provide you with solutions implemented in France in terms of regulation and management with the creation and management of eco-mooring areas provided with buoys. Last year, WWF France developed a toolkit of 8 thematic sheets to facilitate the implementation of eco-mooring areas. There, they have described how you can identify the sites to be protected, how you can study the visitor use, the opportunity studies and the feasibility study needed, and the carrying out of works and management of eco-mooring areas. This document can be downloadable in French and English from the website of WWF France, and you also have the link there on this slide. So for the past two trainings, we had two modules. The first module on the recreational boating management strategy, and then we gave you an overview of regulatory measures used in France. Last time we talked about the opportunity studies in order to understand whether it is feasible or not to create an eco-mooring area. And today we're going to be a bit more technical. We're going to get into the topic, and we're going to focus on the technical specificity of the feasibility studies, which is quite expensive and which requires a lot of resources to really study the location where eco-mooring areas have to be placed. And also we're going to talk about the tools and works made in France for anchoring and for mooring. This is module number 3. It's gonna last about 1.5 hours. It's going to focus on sheet number 5 and sheet number 6 of the toolbox, so the implementation of works. And at the end of my presentation, we're going to have with us Sylvain Blouet, who is the Deputy Director of a Marine Protected Area in France, where they have created an eco-mooring area, which is more or less 10 years old. So he will share his experience with you. Very quickly, I'll go through the key points from the previous training. So it is important to have a good knowledge of the boat fleets and of the regulations in the different areas, the different planning and awareness tools. Then we focused on the opportunity study, which I recall you enables you to collect environmental, regulatory, social, and maritime knowledge of the area. Thanks to the opportunity study, you can initiate a stakeholder consultation. You can identify knowledge gaps and the studies that need to be carried out. And also through an opportunity study, you can estimate the budget and resources needed, as in human and financial resources, to be used for eco-mooring areas. And the opportunity study gives you a go or no go decision, basically. And now I will present you what can be done in a more detailed way. As I said, this is related to sheet number 5 of the toolbox, which I invite you to read. There you can find all the detailed information. Today, I'm going to present you the objectives of the feasibility study and the main key sections of a feasibility study and a cost estimate for the study. Basically, the objectives of a feasibility study. The feasibility study wants to assess the potential impacts of the proposed eco-mooring area. So assess all the potential impacts and also specify the conditions under which the eco-mooring area will be constructing. Then prepare for the operational phase. So you needed to anticipate the budget and the management costs. And also another objective is to prepare the authorization applications. So there are basically four general aspects: diagnosis for impacts, design, number two, and the sizing, whereby you can propose development scenarios. Then point number three, management, covering the operation of the eco-mooring area, how to manage the eco-mooring area and how you can manage it from an economic point of view, and also a regulatory aspect whereby you can apply for an eco-mooring area to the relevant public authorities. In France, depending on the number of buoys and the surface of the area, a feasibility study costs in France between 150,000 euro and 200,000 euro, and it lasts about 12 months in order to then get an answer from the public authorities. So I will get into detail of all the 4 points, okay? So diagnosis, whereby you can assess the impact. Usually you have maps. Through maps, you can see the physical, the environmental data, such as the biocenosis mapping, the physical data, so bathymetry, wind, and so on and so forth. And also maps of the landscape impacts and of the visitor in the area. Usually 35% of the budget of the overall study is taken by the diagnosis. In the list of studies required in section number 1, so you have a study on the physical characteristics of the area, a study on environmental characteristics, the study on the visitor use, and also studies on micro waste in the site. And then I will tell you more about that. Macro waste is, let's say, illegal ballast which has been abandoned on the site. Which can create an obstacle to the mooring of vessel. And also there is the recreational boating visitor survey. This is essential. Through that, you have to specifically analyze the number of boats, their type, size, frequency of passage, duration of mooring. And the survey is really essential because through that you can conceive and design the whole project specifically on the needs of the mooring area and on the number of buoys. As for physical data, there are in situ surveys that need to be done, studies that need to be carried out. But if you want to know a bit more about that and see whether there is already data on your side, you can go to data.shom website, which is very well made. It is updated to 2024, and there we have many physical data online concerning dominant weights, currentology, swell. For this site, for example, you have many updated data already on the SHOM website. And this is a macro waste study, which can be carried out upfront in the first phase, diagnosis. The macro waste study in France is increasingly demanded and requested in order to clean the area before establishing an eco-mooring zone. In an area, for example, where there have been moorings and buoys, you might have, for example, ballasts on the sea bottom, which are not ecologically designed, let's say. And so you have to decide whether to remove them or not. So the waste study enables you to locate the macro waste on the site. You can also assess whether you have to remove the ballast and the macro waste or not. Sometimes there is macro waste on the Posidonia meadow, which needed to remove, but sometimes not. And when you know the number of macro waste, when you have seen their size, and their situation, you can identify the costs and the methods to be used to remove this macro waste. And so it is important to carry out the study on macro waste. Another quite important study, especially when you are in protected areas or areas that are important from an ecological point of view, for example, bays, and where you have to monitor the landscape impact, you also have to carry out a landscape study. So this is a landscape study which is usually requested for the application of eco-mooring areas by state authorities. During the diagnosis phase, this first phase, it is highly recommended to consult local stakeholders, as in you have to organize consultation meetings during the project. There can be public authorities, there can be marine protected area managers, which are nearby, and also the main users of the area, like associations or fishers, diving clubs, or related to tourist activities or swimming activities. The consultation phase, through the consultation phase, you can validate the conclusions of the diagnosis so that each user can contribute to the diagnosis and to the future design of the eco-mooring area. This is also quite important. And then section number two. Section number two relates to design and sizing of the eco-mooring area. In section number two, for example, you can propose different management scenarios taking into account the diagnosis made during the first phase. In France, usually section number two can account for 45% of the budget of the study. Everything depends on the knowledge of the site. Sometimes you have to make very in-depth studies that can be quite expensive. As I said, Section 2 through Section 2, you can propose different scenarios for establishing eco-mooring areas and for sizing the eco-mooring area. You have to identify the installation perimeter of the buoys based on the expertise from section number 1. The number of buoys planned, thanks to the visitor user study, you can understand the real number, the actual number of buoys also by vessel size class. In this section, you also have to decide about the size of the eco-mooring areas. And here you have to make different tests, jetting tests, pull-out tests, and so on and so forth. That all depends on the size of the vessels. This is a map that is being made in the design phase. So uh, this is so each point that you see on the map is the buoy, and the space, the area around each buoy depends on the swing circle of the boat. The swing circle, therefore, depends on the size of the vessel. It depends on the depth of the area where the eco-mooring area is established, and on the size of the mooring line. So, according to the size of the vessel, the swing circle can be bigger or smaller. So here you can see an example. Uh, you can have buoys close by, but as boats get bigger and bigger, the swing circle gets bigger and bigger, and therefore the mooring area has to be bigger, and buoys have to be further away from each other. Okay? As for the design and sizing, you have the ecological anchor system. As I said in previous trainings, oftentimes an eco-mooring area is temporary. So during the year, it is removed, and you can remove the buoys, for example, on the surface and the chain. So there is a fixed component part on the seabed which stays, and the removable component which is removed. So the removable component can be removed during the year, and the fixed component, the fixed part, there you have an anchoring system, and then I will tell you the anchoring systems that you can use. And there is a line and a subsurface float, whereby operators can easily locate the anchor during the following season. This float also has an ecological purpose, because the mooring line from the anchor to the float, and from the float to the buoys on the surface are kept high up, and therefore the chain is prevented from dragging on the seabed. As for section number 3, that concerns management and operations. Here there's a question. Here there's a question, or rather a remark. Noé, can you please help me? The previous slide, this one, is, let's say, the most critical part, the most relevant part, because there are no studies to learn the payload, the dimensions, tech materials, depending on the size of the boats and on the tonnage of the boats. And there's another one. What is the carrying capacity of an eco mooring area, of a mooring area? As for the anchoring types, each anchor has a traction characteristics. I will tell you later on, okay? Because there are different anchoring methods. In any case, there are calculations to be made in order to see the traction capacity and the pull out capacity of the anchor. Also, depending on the sediment and depending on the size of the boat, you can understand what force the anchor needs to have in order to moor the boat. So all anchoring systems have a certain size. And for example, in some cases, you can put different anchors, different screw anchors just for the same buoy. And then there's another question on the carrying capacity of a mooring area, so the number of boats by hectare or square meter. But I think we already talked about it. Well, we can go back to the next slide. This one. Well, actually, the number of boats that by hectare depends on the size of the boat, first and foremost. If you have a very large area and you can put as many buoys as you want, um, everything depends on the size of the boat and also on the depth of the anchoring system. This is why you have a calculation to calculate the swing circle depending on the depth and on the length of the boat. And also there is a safety margin of 20%, so that you can calculate the swing circle and you can put the anchoring system in the right spot. There is another question. I don't know whether you can see it in the chat. As for color codes for the boys, there are different types of boys. Most cases, boys have the same color, and this is a topic because white boys are considered to be the most visible ones. So usually you have white boys, and most of the times the size of the boat is indicated on the buoy. So a boat arriving and taking a buoy knows whether he is authorized or not, because the buoys don't have a color code, but they provide an indication on the size of the boat that can use that specific buoy. There's one question on ghost gears. Are they considered as macro waste, and do you need to remove them from the project area? Well, uh, i- if you want to have an eco-mooring area, you have to remove most macro waste that can have an impact on the Posidonia meadow and that can be dangerous for maritime safety. So a ghost gear, which continues to have an impact, should be removed. So you have to stop the impact, and you have to remove it under safety conditions before it can degrade the area. Okay, thank you. Thank you. We're done with the questions so far. Okay. This is section 3 concerning management and operations. So the consultancy making the feasibility study can propose different management scenarios. And here you can see what type of management you want to have on the area. It can be, for example, public management by the town or by the state, or maybe the management can be delegated to a private company. There are many cases in France where there are private stakeholders, let's say, managing the eco-mooring area. In phase number 3, for each scenario, the aim is to evaluate the financial and human resources required. for managing the eco-mooring area so that managers will be able to choose the best option. And also, in this section, in this phase, you also needed to define the responsibility of the project owner with regard to recreational boaters. So, when the eco-mooring area can be used, for example, according to the wind, according to the strength of the wind, the eco-mooring area can be closed. So uh, the town is no longer, or the municipality is no longer responsible if there's an accident to a recreational boat anchored on the buoy, moored on the buoy. So this is everything is discussed in section 3, in phase number 3. In section number 3, we are concerned with the management of the eco-mooring area, and there is also the economic model that needs to be considered for the eco-mooring area. So here you have to take into account different aspects. In general, you need to identify operating costs, starting from the establishment of buoys, surveillance, maintenance, management costs, like nautical resources, human resources, and sometimes even hardware or software needed for the buoys. There can also be taxes and tax costs. In some cases, you need to pay a tax in order to occupy the maritime domain. Also, you need to take into account the potential income. For example, if the eco-mooring area has to be paid, or if there are paid services such as emptying tanks. And also, you need to consider monitoring costs. After establishment in eco-mooring area, oftentimes you need to carry out monitoring in order to assess the positive impact of the management on the protection of the Posidonia meadow. And also, you have to consider the strategy, the awareness raising strategy and information strategy for the public at large. So, then you can continue with phase number 4, which is the drafting of the application that needs to be sent to the public authorities. There is a question before continuing. Are there any insurance models in order to provide insurance for eco-mooring areas in case that they break, for example? So are there an insurance agency that provide insurance models? Well, I have to say that I don't know this topic in detail, unfortunately, but I know that the type of insurance depends on the type of manager. If it's a private manager is not going to use the same insurance as a public manager. But actually, I cannot give you all the different types of insurance model. I think that depends on the management and on the countries also. Then phase number 4 on the regulation and authorization. In France, all these applications are drafted in the same way. Most of the times, through them, you can identify the impacts at the environmental level, and also the impacts on the heritage and safety at sea. So there are environmental authorizations that need to be uh, acquired, and also heritage authorization. So this takes a lot of time because you have to get into contact with government agencies and state authorities, and that can account for up to 15% of the study budget because you have to collect all the data and send them, and then you have to answer all the different questions. In order to conclude with the feasibility study enables to have an overview of the local ecological landscape and social challenges. Through that, you can specify the sizing and mapping of the eco-mooring area. Uh, you can also identify the technical specifications for implementation. You can have a precise cost estimate of the work, and you can have a timetable for completion of the eco-mooring area, especially for state authorities, which need to have all this data in order to give their authorization. So this is the summary slide. Three key ideas to take away for the feasibility study. So the feasibility study is really essential to study all the aspects of the proposed eco-mooring area. From an ecological point of view, landscaping point of view, geotechnical, sizing, material, regulatory, or economic point of view. This feasibility study must be carried out by a multidisciplinary consultancy, and this consultancy has to work in close collaboration with the site manager and with the state authorities in order to really well understand the characteristics of the area. And the feasibility study can lead to the application and then can lead to the development of works and to the beginning of the works. I don't know whether you have some questions on the feasibility study, because then we will continue with the sheet 6.
I don't see any questions or any remarks, so I can go on. So let's move on to sheet number 6 of the toolbox. And this is about the planning and implementation of the work. I'm going to show you the main steps to carry out these parts of the work. So first of all, it is important to understand the essential steps and the characterization of the seabed, and this can be part of the feasibility study. And then I'm going to show you the different anchoring systems that can be used, or at least the ones that are used in France. Right, so as I said, when it comes to the practical work, it is absolutely paramount to assess properly the seabed. So biocenosis. Biocenosis has to do with everything that is living on the seabed, in the seabed. So it is important to know if we have a sensitive habitat or if the habitat is not so sensitive, for instance, sand. But I mean, last time some participants said that even sandy seedbeds have to be preserved. Yes, of course, but there are different levels of sensitivity. So the biocenosis can also be mapped through satellite imagery, and there are some general biocenosis are made through satellite imagery, or you can also use on-site acknowledgement, so on-site reconnaissance, to have a better understanding of the different seabeds. So with on-site service that can confirm the nature of the seabed. Well, now that you have characterized the seabed and the biocenosis, it is essential to accurate characterize so the sediments, so the thickness of the mat. So you can either do some manual coring, so you can study the sediment layers, the level of compactness and possible pollutants and contaminants. This is usually done manually. So you simply put the special tool for that to do manual coring. Or you can also use the jetting technique. So again, you use a tube and you insert the tube into the ground, and you can somehow sink it as much as you need very deep by using compressed air jets. Well, then when you have the sample, you can understand if it is a hard or softer sediment. So then you can establish the kind of anchoring system to be used. So the grain size is very important. So it's important to analyze the grain size of the substrate. And also it is recommended to make some pull out or extraction tests on anchors. So this is a test to be made in order to understand, which is the pull out force that is needed to extract the anchor. Thanks to this knowledge, you can identify the number of anchors that you need for each buoy. For instance, for skew anchors, the size, and also the resistance capacity. And often the suppliers of anchors can also give you these technical specifications. Let's see how to choose the appropriate anchoring equipment. This depends on the thickness of the seabed, but also it depends on the kind of biosinosis, as I said before. Maybe I'm going to generalize, but actually, if you are confronted with the Posidonia biosinosis, usually these specific screw anchor type is very common. So there is no footprint left on the biocenosis. So this is very good. So there is no damage on Posidonia. It is very resistant. It has a high resistance to pull out. So this guarantees a lot of safety. And when it comes to inspections and maintenance, there's no major problem for the biostenosis. So this is a very common type that is largely used when there are eco-mooring areas. This is ideal to preserve the Posidonia meadows. So, and also they can be pulled out with no impact, no footprint on the Posidonia meadows. But well, these anchors, these screw or helical anchors are the most expensive that I'm going to present you today with. And when it comes to installing them, so no specific equipment is needed and also no specific diving skill. Here you see that there is a sandy bottom. So let's imagine that we have meadows that spread around pretty quickly. So you can use this kind of anchor very easily. They are also ideal for mobile seabeds. And usually the suppliers of such anchors can also give you anchors up to 1 meter, 1 meter 10, or so from 60 to 70 centimeters up to 2 meters. So there are several suppliers of such screw anchors. The installation is very quick. I have already installed one of a 1 meter 40 centimeters. So I did it by myself. It's not very complicated. You can install it very close to the sediment. And these kind of anchor, this screw anchor is not that expensive. And as you can see, even the inspection is pretty easy and has no impact on the biosinosis. Instead, when it comes to the reliability, these anchor is not always the best. It raises doubts because it can be easily pulled out. So that is why I insist on the importance of carrying out an accurate assessment of the seabed. And often they stay put for long times, and it can't, well, to take it out, you really need to pull very hardly. You cannot simply unscrew it. But if you have a sandy bottom and you are far from a sensitive habitat, you could also consider these concrete blocks. Again, you need to use them wisely, and especially these eco-friendly concrete types. So we have today, so concrete blocks today that are eco-designed. So they are compatible with habitats with fish. So they have been also been used in France. They can stay put for a very long time. This is a major benefit. So they have been used reliably for many years. So they are a reliable device and they can be used on any kind of bottom. It doesn't matter if there is a silt or any other kind of bottom. So it stays put. So it is reliable. The major disadvantage is that it can somehow disrupt the seabed. So it needs to be used only if the impact is assessed as close to zero or zero. Then you have this kind of anchoring system. Well, I don't know that very much, I must confess that. So I don't have direct knowledge of it, and I don't even think that it has been used in France. I think that it is more common on the Atlantic side, so not on the Mediterranean side. So these are tilting anchors that are installed through air jets. So they can be, sunk deeply down. And so when they're pulled on by a boat, they tilt to offer greater resistance. So they're anchored in the sediment and must be tilted to be pulled out into the locked position. So they're very resistant to pull out. But again, I have no direct experience with this kind of anchor. If you have any, please do not hesitate to share your own experience with this kind of anchors. The major disadvantage is that this kind of anchor cannot be, taken away very easily. So it needs to be pulled out strongly. Then we have another possibility. So if you are on a sediment that, prevents the use of anchors, well, you have a rock, or maybe you don't have enough sediment, so sediment is too little. So you can opt for this solution, the one that you see on this slide. So either using these screwed plates or these somehow grouted anchoring. So you put like a big screw that is fixed through some grout or some resin. And so what remains visible is just a ring. And this kind of anchoring system is pretty discreet, almost invisible, and it is safe, very low maintenance because you just have a ring, the fixation ring that requires maintenance, nothing else. The major disadvantage is that often when installing this kind of anchoring system, there are major disruptions that can be generated, so acoustic impact, and also the fact that somehow you contribute to the dispersion of fragments of rocks. And again, you need specific equipment to install these anchors. And when it comes to equipment, so you can well imagine that the installation of such anchors is based on the use of specific machines. And also you need labor. So sometimes you need a specific kind of boat. So it depends. Sometimes you need a barge to bring equipment to the mooring zone, or maybe you need also a specific elevation equipment. And so it really depends on what you need to install. Sometimes, of course, you also need skilled divers. When it comes to human resources, you need, experts, you need professional divers with certified professional divers and also specific technicians that have proved expertise when it comes to these hydraulic systems, as well as skipper or barge operators. Well, let's now talk about the works. And there is specific environmental monitoring that is required. For instance, it is important during the construction phase to carry out some environmental monitoring to check the turbidity, the noise impact, and also double check that the works do not make these impacts worse. Before and after the works, it is recommended also to monitor the seagrass health status. So it is important, first of all, to set an initial baseline before installing the chosen anchoring systems. And then you need to keep doing the monitoring every year to assess the evolution and the development of the health status of the seagrass and of the meadows during the works and after the works, especially after the works. So maintenance will be needed, and maintenance will need to be regular and frequent in order to guarantee the perfect integrity of the eco mooring system in order to avoid any problem when it comes to the mooring of the vessels and also the safety and effectiveness of the anchors and the buoys. So let's talk prices. So again, these budgets refer to the French experience, but this is just to give you a ballpark figure. So these are average figures that have been calculated on a number of projects. So the works for 50 boys last up to 15 days, and they can cost around 400,000 euros. I added, a breakdown of the costs. So you have the equipment, so the buoys, the anchoring systems, chains, so equipment and tools, and then you have everything that has to do with the human resources that are needed, so the vessels to be used, and also the environmental monitoring that is needed, as I told you. Right, so let's see some ideas to take away. So all the operations that I described are pretty technical and require technical and human resources. It is important to carefully choose the right type of anchoring system. So when it comes to the parts one and two of the visibility study are really aimed at this, at establishing the most suitable anchoring system. And secondly, it is very important while planning the works to plan them in an environmentally sustainable way. So in order to reduce to the minimum any possible impact during the installation phase. So please do not hesitate to ask questions. And I hope to somehow answer your questions, and I hope I properly answered to your questions. But now I'm going to give the floor to Sylvain Bleuet, Deputy Director of the Côte Agathoise MPA, so not far from Montpellier, where I live. And they installed 10 years ago an eco-mooring area, so he has direct experience when it comes to these eco-mooring systems. Hello, everybody. So shall I take the floor? Oh, yes, perfect. Hello, everybody. I am Sylvain Blouet. I'm the director of an MPA that is located in France. I took the floor during module number one. I don't know if anybody who joined module number one is there today too. Yes, yes, yes. There are some people who also joined module number one. Well, our goal was to reduce or better to eliminate the impact of anchoring on the Posidonia meadows by installing an eco-mooring area. So around the 2012, 2013, we did it. We have been among the first to do such a thing in the region. So I'm going to share with you some technical aspects. So about the installation of such an eco-mooring area and also what we did in terms of study and also the kind of feedback that we had. And also, please do not hesitate to stop me at any time if you have specific questions about what I'm going to say. So we are managers of a Natura 2000 site of 6,000 hectares, more or less. It is managed by a municipality. So you have the city of Agde, and as a city of Agde, we manage this area, and we have been the managers for 20 years now. And we have a management body that is in charge of this, and it is composed of 9 agencies. Each agency has a specific mission: awareness raising, training, scientific monitoring, and also maritime infrastructure, as well as maritime uses. Well, as Amelie already said, there are several steps before embarking on such a project. So, first of all, well, this is what we did. We needed to carefully reflect on the strategy. So we did that with some public services, so with some specific French bodies that are in charge of environmental issues, especially when it comes to specific permissions and authorizations to set up, for instance, mooring areas at sea. And then we required some validation. So the project so generated, first of all, an opportunity study. So the opportunity study was carried out and then was validated by the specific board of the management body of our MPA, and all the relevant stakeholders were involved, and I'm referring to the maritime stakeholders. And so our opportunity study got validation. It was green lighted. And then we kept discussing with the relevant stakeholders from the very beginning, also beyond the pure technical aspects. So we got together all the major relevant stakeholders and we tried to double check together to be on the same page in order then to proceed with the project of installation of an eco-mooring area, because you have a professional fisheries, you have divers, so you need to consider all the needs of all the relevant stakeholders. So all the relevant stakeholders need to gather to see if there is a common ground to build on. So this needs to be done at a very early stage. And also when it comes to zoning, because if there is already some zoning, you need to agree on the specific areas of the zones that you're going to consider to set up the mooring area. I mean, such a consensus is absolutely crucial in order to proceed with the rest of the project. Well, when it comes to the opportunity study, well, in France, we could take advantage of the Natura 2000 contracts that let us finance all the required studies as well as the necessary equipment and installation works of the eco-mooring area. So as Amelie said, we carried out several studies. So first of all, a study on habitats and seabeds. So we mapped everything. So we carried out a high definition mapping of the rocky areas, the areas with meadows of sensitive species. At that time, we had Pinna nobilis, for instance, but also we had Gorgonia populations that were pretty concentrated. So we wanted to really assess and map the major ecological challenges at stake. And also, we carried out very refined bathymetric studies in order to know the profile. Well, we have a 50 centimeter depth of the mooring area down to some meters. So, I mean, the depth is not very, very big. So we needed to be very careful when defining the mooring area because we could not risk, I mean, having edgy or tricky areas for the vessels. And also when it comes to the uses, so we also studied the uses as well as the landscape. So we considered the fact that this eco-mooring area would be part of a protected area. So we needed to understand from the very beginning the impact of such a system on the landscape. I mean, we tried also to consider that. I don't know if such a landscape preservation requirement is present also in other parts of the Mediterranean basin, but we were asked also to consider this aspect. And then totally from the conception and the design down to the installation, it took us totally 3 years. And the vast majority, the biggest chunk of time was devoted to the study on the uses. And then when it comes to the mapping and the bathymetry, all that part was quicker because we had already done some zoning, so everything was much easier thanks to the previously done zoning of the same area. Then we decided to opt for these solutions. So we had sand, we had rocks, we had Posidonia meadows. So we decided to install some anchors on the sand and others on the rock. So this matches perfectly what Amelie already illustrated you. So we tried to carefully study the perimeter and we tried to avoid, the meadows. So we did not put the screwdrivers, so to speak, in the meadows. We have small patches, and so we installed the anchors among the patches. But not directly on the patches. So we put the screws on a plate of rock. That was easy for us. It was also more suitable to the habitat. So the screws are the screws that you previously saw. So these anchors with screws, and you see a diver that is fixing some cable. So we put some bars in some cases to better fix the screws in order to install larger units. And then you have again these plaques that have been installed on the rocky bottom. So, for instance, during the study phase, and that happened at the very, very beginning of our project, we did not carry out a proper geotechnical study for the anchoring solutions, but we recommended doing that because we wanted to put some screws for the sandy bottom, but actually there was rock beneath the sand. So sometimes you see sand and you think that is homogeneous, but instead below the sand you can have rocky parts, rocky bottoms, and then you have problems because you see that the screw cannot be sunk. So you need to find emergency solutions. So, and then things become more complicated because you have already submitted all the documentation and the special request for authorizations. That is why we insist on the importance of carry out all the opportunity and feasibility study beforehand. And then according to the kind of the rocks that you have, you choose different kinds of grouts. We had very chippy rocky grounds of volcanic origin, so it was hard to find very compact rocky bottom hard enough to have the plates being installed. And then when it comes to the installation, so we enrolled a specialized company with 4 divers that came and made the installation. It took a week more or less to install 30 buoys. And yes, this is the average duration that Amelie already told you. Right, as far as the buoys are concerned, we chose the ones that are called Harmony. It's a model, it's a brand, and they have specific sliding tubes that are very practical. So you could install the ring on the boat, on the vessel. So it is so much easier than to install them. So thanks to this trick, it was much easier and lighter for the uh, diver to do the installation. And also you avoid any, breakage because usually we see that there are problems of breakages of the buoys. So we tend to replace 3 or 4 per season. We didn't put any chains and we remove systematically all the chains because we realized over the years that everything that has to do with chains, I mean, uh, tends to age in not a very good status, and then even the wintering is more complicated. So we use only rope everywhere. We just use rope, and even, we have shack shacks shackles, so mobile devices. We try to get rid of everything that is too rigid. So we try to replace any kind of chain-like part with software, more mobiles elements. And if you have a 15-meter vessel, I will more on buoys equipped with a specific length matching the specific size of the vessel. We did not use the payload of the vessel, the weight of the vessel, because many people have no idea about that. Sometimes it's hard to have people knowing the size of their vessel, and very often they pay at the port according to the size of the vessel. But still, it's not that easy to get this information because sometimes the size of the vessel is misunderstood. Well, we have max 15 meters, for instance, marked on the buoys, and people thought that that indication was applicable to the height of the water column. So they thought that it was a piece of information for the depth, but it was not the case. It was a piece of information referred to the length of the vessels. So it is important to avoid such misunderstandings. And it is not always so evident. And the buoys have been installed by a company that is also in charge of their removal. So when it comes to the insurance and the question that was asked about the insurance, so which are the available insurance options? Well, we we have a supplier so that installs and removes the buoys. Thanks to this solution, so this company has insurance. So uh, this supplier dealing with installation and removal of the buoys is covered with an insurance. So any possible problem is covered by the company. But well, I must confess that everything is pretty theoretical, so we had no practical case. But of course, usually the maker says it's not my fault, I'm not liable because the buoy was not properly installed, but then the installer says it's not my fault. So, well, if problems arise, it's always very hard to establish who is to be held accountable for the cost. But again, we had recourse to a third party, but I also must confess that we had no major issue. So I don't really know how it works with insurances. I'm very honest. And then we are a municipality, so a public local authority. And so we have a public management. So when it comes to insurances, I mean, things for us are insured as, I mean, public assets. So in case of problems, the insurance of the municipality covers for, I don't know, the damage incurred by a vessel that, I don't know, had a damage, similar damage related to the um, not proper use of the buoys. But again, it is also important to prove that if there are installation or removal problems, we need to prove that the operations were not carried out properly. And every year we double check that the buoys are maintained, that they're double checked, and that everything that has degraded has been preserved, and that everything so is properly managed. So sometimes we carry out visual inspections to see if the external supplier does everything properly, also maintenance wise. Well, as to the works organization, we you need to make the equipment to be installed by grade A professional divers. This is the French classification system. I don't know if it is the same in other countries, but still, certainly, this is one of the most expensive professional in this field. So we have a mixed anchoring system. So because we have several kinds of bottoms, we have sandy seabeds, but also rocky seabeds. And as to the mechanical resistance to rock, well, at the time, that was not compulsory because there was no specific piece of regulation on that. So, but please, if do it today, and well, the sandy screens sometimes are buried into the sand. So sometimes we they get lost at the end of the season, and so sometimes even by leaving a floating buoy, we had problems in refinding them because sometimes they are somehow displaced because of the currents in the sea. So in some sectors, some screws were displaced because of the strength of the sea currents and of the sea swell. And well, I would say that working on rocky bottoms maybe is better because uh, sandy screws can, I mean, provoke problems in the long run. So hard substrates are easier to be managed. They're more reliable, I mean, in terms of duration. And also it's easier to replace a flake than a sandy screw. we have not used concrete blocks, or better, well, we have used some of them. Actually, we have kept those that were already in place, but they're very, very few. And yes, I mean, so concrete blocks can be an alternative solution to screw anchors, but again, you can have specific problems of these concrete blocks being buried into sand. So they got sunken in sand. But yes, it's possible to use them as a replacement. We used some concrete blocks. For instance, for the marking of the 300 areas. So usually the swimming areas are marked by such concrete blocks because we did not want to put sandy screws everywhere. But today we also have some of these concrete blocks that are completely covered in sand. So 1 meters length that have gone lost. And I don't know, maybe we had many storms this year, so maybe we're going to find them again. I don't know. It depends. Every season we wonder whether we're going to find them again or not. But that can add to the difficulty of the management because every year you need to make sure that the same number of buoys is in place and ready to be used. And also, and this is something that I already told you last time. So try to stay on the safe side when it comes to the size of the perimeter. So don't be tight. Don't be too tight. Well, sometimes you have no choice, but if you can choose, if you can opt for a larger perimeter with enough space among the boys, that will let you more dynamism in the future so that you will be able to change the size of the boys. So sometimes they require, if they're bigger, a bigger swing radius, and we have bigger vessels in the ports. Well, today people tend to buy large boats. Well, it's more common. So the swing radius has been increasing, and so you need more space. So that is why it is always better to plan for a larger perimeter. So please do, because if you do not have enough space, that can be a problem. So try to be, somehow far-sighted when you make this kind of plan. And at that time, we had problems in finding the
At the
right
time, it
company
was difficult for
specialized
us
in such works.
find a company that was specialized. For maintenance today, it's a bit complicated today to find consultants or companies that can provide good maintenance of these moorings because that require a lot of technical skills that underwater companies do not always have because usually they work on weldings or on removing um, uh, mooring blocks. But in terms of size, uh, uh, size of boat, floatability. A lot of skills are required, and you cannot always find them among other water companies. So it's quite hard to find consultants and very good service providers for maintenance. So what worked pretty well was the consultation and the discussion we had with users in order to well identify the eco-mooring area and also with the state authorities. We found quite convenient mooring area solutions at the time. 120,000 euro for the establishment of the eco mooring area, just for the technical park, for 30 boys. So 120,000 euro for 30 boys. As for the feasibility study, socioeconomic data mapping, that was done internally by the marine protected area. So the cost of human resources for our marine protected area staff is outside the 120,000 euros. Sometimes it is difficult to find good rocks of the good size, of the proper size. Sometimes we thought that we had two rocks, but actually it was one big rock. And also it was difficult to adjust the carrying capacity of the Ecomorin area. And this is just to give you an idea of the budget. That was 2012. Things have changed a bit, but technical studies, establishment and maintenance for 1 year for some 30 boys was about 160,000 euros. And I'm done. I'm done with that. I don't know whether you have some questions. I have a question. I have a technical question. You chose not to use chains for maintenance reasons. I understand that. But was the aim? What was the aim? Was it not difficult to have a good alignment between the buoy and the anchoring point? No. Um, we had stringing with strings with cables, but these cables actually oxidate over the time and they break. So we just replaced everything with very good and resistant strings, but very classical strings. It was easier for us to change the strings. It is much cheaper in terms of maintenance. Uh, we had a line that was quite straight, and once it was in the water, the line tends to uh, go down and to search a float. So we didn't have any problem because when you put chains, the problem of the chain is that it does not amortize the shocks. And so it can break the bottom part of the buoys, and there is the link between the chain and the buoy that can give you some problems. But when, uh, uh, when you put something else, it's a type of strings which is a very, very resistance, but it is even too much resistance and it does not create amortization. And sometimes they can give problems because the strings does not get longer. And so the string that gets longer can cushion, let's say, the part between the buoy and the anchoring point, and it avoids any kind of break. Maybe it's far too technical, but anyway, this is what we're using today. Thank you, Sylvain, for your presentation of your case studies. There's another question in the chat. What are the best systems for boats or charter boats that tend to go to the area very frequently, and they use a lot the anchoring system, and therefore the anchoring system can deteriorate? Would it be better maybe to use one system rather than another? Well, no. Um, See, a boat that regularly uses the buoy can ruin the buoy more easily, but not as much, I think. This is not the main problem, I think. The buoys are used, and the wear and tear is simply given by the action of the swell on the buoy, of the waves on the buoy, because at sea everything is moving all the time, all the time, all the time. Even if it's a tiny bit, it's always moving. And usually there can be a bit of friction on the parts, on the outer parts of the buoy. It's not the fact that you are mooring on the buoy, but it's that continuous friction. But then you are in tension when you are mooring, and when you are in tension, there is no friction. But this is not the problem. This does not cause the wear and tear of the buoy because on one day, 24 hours, uh, I mean, mooring does not last 24 hours. There are no boats at night, for example, back home. In all the mooring systems that we are installing for anything, for mooring lines of boats, for signposting, for markings and everything, you need to use very user-friendly systems with very convenient ropes that can be easily maintained and changed. Um, the strings must be acknowledged as consumables, so they need to be changed every 2 or 3 years. Strings are not very expensive, and you can maintain them quite easily, and it's quite cheap to maintain. It's better than rather than using systems with very sophisticated strings, with shackles or little devices in order to prevent the rotation of the buoy. Um, so that has fast wear and tear. It can break very easily, whereas the strings are easy, very practical, are cheap, and they can be changed every now and then. And there's easy maintenance. I hope I have answered the question. If I may say something, that requires surveillance, regular surveillance and maintenance. And in terms of investments, investments are cheaper and but they can be as effective, as much effective. Yes, strings today are quite good. We have used many different systems. We have tested different materials, and in the end, we have seen that the most effective system is strings, standard strings. Thank you. Thank you, Silvana, for your presentation, for your feedback. It's also interesting because this is a feedback on quite old studies, which shows that some studies today are still necessary. For example, sediments, studies on sediments, which are quite important. It is important to get to know the sediment before putting the anchoring systems. Noe, we have, I think, a satisfaction survey. Yes, a satisfaction inquiry on the Slido. And then on the next slide, you can see our contact details. And on the chat, you can find the link to the Slido form. Click on the link and that appears. Are you satisfied by this training module? Please answer the question. In your answer, you can also say if you would like to deal with other topics during the next module, if there are any topics you might be interested in the next module, for the next module. The next module is going to be on the economic model of eco-mooring areas in France. It's going to be very specific and it's going to be related to France, basically, but it can be a good example. I think this is going to be quite a short training, which is going to relate to sheet number 7 and 8 of the toolbox. So since we have 1.5 hours available, maybe we could focus on other topics that you might be interested in or that maybe have already been discussed during the last 3 modules. But if there is anything you're interested in discussing for the next training next week, please tell us or write to us so that we can talk about it next Tuesday. So, which topics covered in the previous training sessions would you like to discuss again next week? Take your time to write. And then you also have our contact details on the next slide. If you want to have a more specific information on anchoring systems or on how to establish eco-mooring areas, drop me a line. Don't hesitate to contact me and send us all your questions.